Escape room workers of Reddit. What's the most absurd thing players have done? Finally a question I can answer. Most of the time people are just plain stupid, which can be fun and frustrating depending on how the people react to realizing it. It's very annoying when the people are cocky beforehand and then don't manage anything without a hint and somehow blame us for messing up. There's also been instances of people throwing up or trying to use the prop toilet inside of one of the "prison cells." But I think my favorite absurd thing was the one proposal I had while I worked at an escape game. You might think, well, isn't that romantic? And I thought so too, until I found out that escape rooms aren't just something they both love. That makes the proposal unique. It was the first room ever. Never played an escape game ever. Weird choice of scenery to propose. Even weirder when you consider that they took 2 friends with them. But it doesn't end there. They barely managed to get out, and the ring was hidden in the very last queue, so if they hadn't managed, shit would have become very awkward. It did anyway, because when he proposed, neither of their friends really reacted to it, just stood there blankly, which was made even worse by the fact that the guy was supposed to film the whole thing, which he didn't, and the other girl didn't even know he was proposing, so the surprise at least should have coerced a smile out of her. Nothing. The proposal speech was also delivered with as much passion as a paper bag, and as it turned out the dude told everyone at the reception that he didn't really want to marry her, at least not for the time being, but she got pregnant, so now it kind of pushed him into it. She said yes, but holy shit, all of us watching were hoping she wouldn't. Now imagine proposing, or even worse being proposed to in an escape room, knowing you are being watched and listened to through cameras. What an absurd choice to make. Obligatory not an escape room worker, but participant. Once I went to an escape room with my mom, dad, mom's BFF and her 2 sons. The premise of the room was a bank heist. We start off trying to break in from a small room. After solving the clues there, afterwards we go to another room via the bricks in the wall, solve the clues there, open the vault, take as much as we can. Meanwhile the alarm starts to blare, and we need to get out quickly via another brick wall. In the second room, there were a couple of murdered dummies and an actor who was playing dead. He was the one who sounds the alarm after we managed to break into the vault. Well, everyone was trying to get into that aforementioned vault. I was waiting there with my empty money bag and decided to loot the dead bodies, including the actor, either for more clues or valuables. We were pretending to be robbers. After all, sadly, all of the bodies had nothing on them. After all is over and done with, we took the money bags ABD managed to bolt. We sit there and talk about the room, pretty thrilled. That was when the GM comes, laughing his ass off, in tow with the actor, who looks pretty bewildered. What they told us was that during the 3 years, at the time, this escape room was created, nobody had tried to frisk the bodies, not to mention so thoroughly. I checked every pocket, even took the shoes off the dummies. Didn't go that far with the actor, though. I felt really bad. I didn't realize the actor wasn't a dummy. He was laying on his face during the heist, and I didn't take his shoes out because I noticed the paper with the code on a shelf close to the body. I was mortified. I had checked even his back pockets. My group was faking laughing their ass off. Guy was pretty young too, and new in this job, so I guess we were both pretty embarrassed. Edit. Oh, wow. My first award ever. Thank you, kind stranger. Obligatory not an escape room worker, but a friend of mine, and I checked one out in Denver, and while we were waiting to go we were chatting up with the worker about any funny stories they've witnessed. She told us that one time a couple had come in who were on a first date. Since they could overhear everything, they found out that the plan was to do an escape room and then go get dinner and drinks afterward. Seems like a pretty nice date. Have fun at an escape room, and then you have something to bond over during dinner and drinks. It's a pretty risky first date though, as escape rooms can bring out the beast in people, so to bring someone you don't know takes some trust that you two have hit it off at least verbally/textually prior to going. It turns out the beast that this girl unleashed manifested itself in complete disdain for the whole situation. Apparently this guy picked up the girl from her house for the date. Seems trusting. The guy through all this was very nice, they said, and she was already hammered. They get into the escape room, and she proceeds to just sit in the corner while the guy tries to figure out dial rotations on a toaster oven, asking questions like, so what are some places you want to travel to next? She wouldn't respond to the questions and sort of just belittled him for not being able to figure out the clues, while she sat there she did, even when the guy got into the second room. The employee said it was like getting a voyeuristic view into a dumpster fire of a first date in a time-pressured environment, where both participants were quite literally unable to escape the situation, until the time ran out. When they were let out, the girl proceeded to thank the employees for a wonderful time. Though it was clear she didn't understand the part about how the employees are watching everything to help give clues and whatnot. TLDR, a guy took a drunk girl to an escape room on a first date and proceeded to have the most awkward first date ever, locked in a room with people watching and listening to the cringe. TLDR for all you lazy folks at the bottom, oh boy, my time to shine. So I worked for an escape room place during college, and we had this one group of teenagers come in, and they had to be about 13 to 16 years old. And keep in mind they even had a chaperone of one of their moms, because some rooms that have a lot of delicate wires and sheet, and we don't want kiddies yanking and getting their eyebrows singed and dicks falling off. Anyways, I was walking down the hallway to the room they were in the process of playing, and man did it smell like hot sheet on the hood of a car that was left in the 110-degree heat. Mind you, I just thought someone took an atomic dump in the bathroom at the end of the hall, which one of our dudes has been known to do. So I went to spray some Febreze, which only accomplished making it smell like someone smacked the sheet around with one of those air fresheners you hang in your car. Not good. After about 30 minutes, and when the group came out of the room, one of my coworkers went in to reset the room. And lo and behold, one of those pimple-ridden shats had taken a massive pup right in the corner behind the door, and was even nice enough to build a little memorial teepee over it to try to cover it up with one of the chairs and blankets in the room. The worst part was the Karen was trying to get her money back, saying it was there when they got there. Like, ma'am, we can see the sheet running down your kid's leg. TLDR. Teenagers came to play a room with chaperone Karen. One of the pimpled shats took dump in corner of room, built memorial with chair and blanket to cover up. Karen tried to get money back by saying it was there already. Didn't get money back, we say sheet running down kid's leg. Saturday company management team building. I hate these to begin with, but unfortunately I'm just a junior at this point. Participation is mandatory. Somehow ended on the team with a Karen, both literally and figuratively. The hair, the voice, the way she talks to us, even though everybody wasn't sure who everybody was. Just terrible handwriting on name cards. I knew instantly I was not a fan, but whatever, just make it through. 5 minutes in she freaks and has a panic attack because unannounced fear of enclosed places. Who the fuck does that? A Karen, that's who. Team doesn't know if she is just being Karen or she is really having a panic attack. Starts taking these crazy deep breaths, about 5 that I remember, and then just passes out and busts her head on a table in room, gushing blood everywhere. Team freaks out and literally all try to hit locked door, screaming in same time. Now it's possible nobody helped because they were actually in shock, or they were like, fat Karen. As I stare at poor Karen, realizing nobody has any interest in helping, I take off shirt and start administering first aid. Fuck yeah, Boy Scouts finally paying off. She awakes and I calm her down until paramedics make it there. She ends up with a concussion and few stitches on head. Walk in Monday and instantly called into meeting with CFO. I'm not worried, but I'm like, oh shit, I've never even met this man. Well, come to find out, Karen wasn't an employee, she is his wife. Not sure if anybody knew, I sure as shit didn't. He thanks me and tells me how impressed he was with my leadership and action taking. 1 month later, he makes me a senior directly under him. So I guess the moral of story is, never let anybody, not even a Karen, make you lose your sense of compassion. Also get your kids in the Scouts or something that teaches basic first aid. TLDR. Saved a Karen like a hero due to intensive Scout training and got a great promotion from work for it. I posted this on another related question a couple weeks ago. Lol. Oh boy. My fiance and I both worked at an escape room for a while in college. Fun job, awful boss. Anyway, there are so many things. One time I was at the front desk and my friend was GM, and we had this huge party of Herbalife ladies. For those who don't know, it's an MLM which sells a bunch of scammy shit including these healthy energy arm patches, literal 100% caffeine, which all of these women were wearing. I was wondering why all 20 of these relatively conservative looking middle-aged ladies were acting like they had all been simultaneously bombing speed just before walking in. Then I realized what was up. Lol. They failed the room, but quickly, in a state of caffeine-induced panic and euphoria. We had a room with bunk beds. It was supposed to be a Cold War era submarine, and boss had to kick at least 1 or 2 people out for trying to fuck on them. We have cameras. We can see you. This one my fiance witnessed, not me. One of our rooms was themed like an old Timmy train car with lots of dark wood and lots of vault photos framed on the walls. This will be important. There was this one faking puzzle which was a constant bringer of anxiety because it relied on a trigger concealed in a candlestick holder. When you enter the game, candle holder is on its side. You sit it up. Secret doors are triggered to open in the walls. Problem was, boss was a cheapus and never replaced faulty game element, so this candlestick took 8 years to trigger the response and we were always having to unscrew the bottom and replace the batteries. Anyway, somebody left the screwdriver in the room in between games and no one noticed while opening the room. The customers find it right off the bat, and with the impeccable logic of the inexperienced escape room goer, they then proceed to unscrew each and every picture frame from the walls of the room in record time, and by the time the game master noticed, it was carnage. GM probably should have noticed more quickly. Lol, but still weird. We also had an engagement in that same room at one point, where we had to hide the ring inside of the bomb at the end of the room. Goal was to defuse the bomb in time. Doors hiding bomb pop open. Guy pops the question. Pretty sure she said yes. So many drunk bachelor/bachelorette parties who tore the rooms up. I get it, but Jesus guys. Had a group finish in 20 minutes by skipping the 2 other rooms. The final door code was GPS coordinates which you could find in the 3rd room. Turns out in the very first room one of the decorations was a world map, old one like leathery from 30 years back. One of the participants knew geography and how to read GPS coordinates from a map. They noticed the door code length, and he just went straight at the map, found the approximate city coordinates. When they got out he said the clues weren't really good, because he couldn't be 100% sure of the coordinates, and had to adjust a bit which he shouldn't had to have to point. I showed the photo we took at the end to all my coworkers and no one remembered anyone. It was most likely their first time. They were a bit disappointed after seeing that they missed almost everything, so we offered them a free game in one of our other rooms. We also had a group of 3 students stuck on an equation written on a glass. In theory you had to erase the equation with a tissue and only a portion of it would not erase, thus revealing a code. One of them looked at the equation, said it was unsolvable, so they all considered it was part of the decoration. The 3 of them went to check it out at some point and they all thought it was decoration. I had to lead them into trying to erase it. It was the sole help they received from me. The very same group, in the final room, found our skeletons dismembered and proceeded to rebuild them from scratch, because they found some numbers on a few bones we never noticed. Well, lo and behold, we now have 1 complete skeleton all fixed up. Turns out they were bioinformatics students, I think. Not sure, it was a few years back. Also, they did the whole stuff without turning the lights on. The theme was an abandoned metro station with the front of a carriage which had a flashing light, so they went back to the flashing light to read every clue. It wasn't complete darkness, so you could see pretty well except for reading some papers. I thought of telling them to turn it on, but since they were on time and didn't seem bothered, I never did. After all of this, they still managed to get out in time. Moral of the story, they thought too much and searched too far. This one's actually kinda sad. I had this woman, her boyfriend/husband/baby daddy/something, and their daughter, maybe 9 to 12 years old, come in to do an ancient 9 Egyptian museum themed room. They all seemed excited at first. I let them in and turned on the rules video, which they seemed to stay quiet for. Once the game started, though, the woman showed her true Karen colors. The daughter would try to solve things and play with the props and the dad would generally help her out and keep her from doing anything bad. The woman however would constantly be snapping at the both of them and yanking clues and props out of their hands. Eventually she got so mad at the daughter because she was trying to solve puzzles and having fun that she kicked the daughter out of the room. This child went out and sat in the lobby by her faking self, just trying not to cry. I was watching on the camera and I was so upset I couldn't do anything. Luckily, the dad came out after 3 to 4 minutes, sat with her and calmed her down. All the while this lady was still trying to solve puzzles by herself in the room. After a bit longer, the dad and kid went back in and the mom tolerated them until their time ran out. Definitely one of the most absurd things I've seen. But it doesn't end there. A few weeks later, they were back to do another. And guess what? The same thing happened. They ended up winning this one, but again, about 3/4 of the way through, the mom got stuck, and the child was trying to help, and the mom got pissed, screamed at her, and then kicked child and the dad out of the room this time. Again, she was in the room just trying to do puzzles by herself, while the dad and kid were comforting each other sitting in the lobby. I'm glad that kid has such a great father figure. She seemed pretty attached to him. Hopefully she grows up, and I don't mean the kid, I mean the mom. LMAO. TLDR mom is abusive and kicks kid and dad out of multiple rooms, ends up trying to solve puzzles herself. I'm an assistant manager at an escape room. I've had people break furniture apart looking for stuff inside. I've had people see a glass tube that says no touch. You use air pressure to open it, and they pushed over the desk it was on to shatter the tube. I've been asked if Japan is inside Great Britain. I've seen groups stumped by an unlocked door. You just open the door. I've seen groups stumped by a light switch. It was literally a normal light switch. I had a drunk group come to the decision it would be fun to break as much stuff as they could before I could stop them. This one was before I started, but they had a group decide something was being a mirror and they punched it, breaking their hand. On the flip side, I had a group of 550-60-year-olds that were running a bit late. I warned them, if they were too late I would have to take off time, and they didn't seem worried at all. They got into the room and started solving everything instantly. They saw a part of a puzzle, called out what it was and what it meant they would find, and it was insane. They finished the room in 22 minutes with 0 clues, which no one else has even got close to. I came in at the end, flabbergasted, and asked if they had fun. They replied that they liked the ambience and the puzzles seemed well put together. I asked how they just did that, and they said we are all retired and just travel the country playing escape rooms. This is close to our 200th room. I swear people go feral when they enter a room, but it sure as hell is interesting. Added some more stories as I remember them. I managed an escape room for several years, so I have plenty of stories. Two of my favorites. A group of 8 guys went into one of our rooms. Most of them were pretty into the game, but one was clearly a little lost. So he proceeded to take off his shirt while looking into the camera and then did push-ups for the rest of the game. His team had to walk around him a lot. The room smelled pretty rank after. Also had a group show up for our last slot of the night, around 11, thinking they had booked 2 rooms, but they had only booked 1 and the others were all full. They had like 14 people and our maximum was 8. Wanting to be nice, I squeezed a few extras into the one room, at their request, while the others went to a bar across the road. The big group in the room proceeded to trash the place, breaking several things, most notably tearing the drawers off a dresser to bypass the locks. When they exited the room, I told them they had to pay the damages as per the waiver I had explained and they had signed before the game. They denied and shouted and fought with me for a while, despite me having camera footage of the act, before storming out. One person felt bad and came back a few minutes later to give me a $20 bill. To top it off, they left a horrible Google review. There were also a lot of amazing things, like school trips, marriage proposals, and super enthusiasts in themed costumes. It was a great gig when escape rooms were at their peak. I was both an actor and a game master for an escape room. The role I played the most during my time there was a zombie. I'd get chained to the wall and hopefully scare the shit out of some paying customers, all in a day's work. As the zombie, I was supposed to put on the MacUpan costume in the room so there was no chance of groups seeing me before they came in the room. This often meant I would bring my bag in the room and stash it in the cabinet I would burst out of to scare the groups. I should note that this cabinet had little stickers all over the inside of it saying there were no clues in the cabinet. Well, one day a particularly clever gentleman looks inside the cabinet and grabs my bag. Surely the no clue stickers, the macup, and the fact that the bag doesn't match the theme would be a hint that this is, in fact, not a clue, but we can't fool his vast intellect. They are but a clever ruse. This observant genius proceeds to dump my sheet on the floor, finds my actual keys and then starts checking them on the locks around the room. I'm trying to stay in character, so I start snarling and screaming at him, and try to signal the GM that, hey, this dude has my keys. GM does nothing, so I have to wait until he gets bored and tosses the keys on the floor with the rest of my possessions. I then had to unchain myself, grab my sheet, shove it in my bag, put it back in the cabinet and chain myself back up, all still in character. Even though the group had this high IQ individual, they didn't get out. Unchaining myself and zombie screaming in that guy's face was very satisfying. Oh. A question I can answer are the very first rules. Don't climb on anything. Yet, people have climbed on everything, including a rickety old wooden dresser, to pull down a sign that said in massive letters, "Don't touch." Not part of the game. There's a fragrance cabinet full of candles. You're meant to smell certain areas to match them up to numbers. There's little holes for the players to stick their nose in. Someone stuck a bunch of locks in there. We never open it and didn't expect this, so we didn't find the locks for weeks. Other players found them when they tried to do the same thing. There's one room that used to have an RC car component and now doesn't. Therefore there's a small hole the size of a doggy door in one of the doors. Behind that door is a room they can't enter but can see into from several windows, and in that room is a TV, which one puzzle requires them to turn on. The box that plays the video is always running, and the remote for the box sits in front of the TV. The TV display itself is controlled by a swinging remote. They are supposed to swing from one window and catch from the other. Multiple people have gotten the smallest member of the group to crawl through the RC car door to use the box remote instead. I'm surprised anyone had ever fit, to be honest. There's probably more, but it's 12:30 AM here and I'm tired. I might edit with more later. Oh boy, finally an Ask Reddit I can answer to. Some of my highlights. Some guys smuggled in a lot of small bottles of liquor, the ones you can drink in one sip. They managed to always drink them out of our sight, except in the last room, where they really didn't care anymore, or were drunk enough. The problem, they left the bottles everywhere. Days later we still had groups finding some of the bottles, and to this day I'm sure we are still missing some. Another one. I'm from Europe, and since that accident in Poland our safety regulations are pretty strict. Every room has an emergency button which opens the door next to it. We always tell our customers to not press the button, except if needed to, because it would mess up our electronics and they could not play further after pressing it. This is complete BS. We use those buttons regularly to move between rooms. So, this group of people is told the exact same thing right before entering the room. We let them in, close the door, and I go to my workstation, sit down and fall from grace. They immediately got into the last room. Cue panic mode. Did I leave the door open? No, I always double check. Electrical failure? Unlikely. The light would fail too. Panic intensifies. I get into the room, ready to tell them thousands of excuses, then I see it. The button. The exact button I told them not to press is pressed. So yeah, that was a short game. They afterwards told me they wanted to see if the button really works. Yes, it does. It always does. TLDR. People are stupid in the most entertaining ways. I once had a group try to take a Holler's fridge out of the wall after telling them twice not to remove it. The same group had two older men being very condescending to their female and or younger colleagues as well as me. One old lady was all huffy because there were no telephones in the 50s. Had one group yell hello at a dark crawl space for about 5 minutes until I told them there probably wouldn't be an answer unless they explored it. One group tried to throw a key out of a window. One group was not very fast but super polite and had a lot of fun. One dude solves a puzzle and the other turns around. Man, you're so smart. You're such a bus driver. which is still my favorite quote point. In general, you learn pretty quickly that nothing is safe or sacred, not electrical outlets, not cameras, not even the wallpaper. Also, through many funky situations, it really helped me set boundaries and assert myself, since I'm the one guiding and deciding, so to speak. It has helped me learn to cope better with stressful situations and adapt, as well as being a job that really keeps you on your toes at all times. In conclusion, it has been the most fun work experience I have ever had, and if I'm able to, I want to continue working in the field for a long time. In a zombie escape room, I, Game Master, once told a group that the zombie might be willing to give a clue if someone meowed. All 10 people started doing animal impressions for 20 minutes. Bad ones. Rolling around on the ground, making terrible screeches and howling. One guy sounded like a dying pterodactyl, and he was jumping with his arms in the air. I had been trying so hard not to laugh, but I managed to get out, "What the hell animal are you trying to be?" To which he repeated the screech and continued jumping, showing off for the zombie actor that had his back turned to keep from laughing, and yelled, "I'm a kangaroo." Another screech. His girlfriend grabbed him and lowered his arms, just shaking her head, "No." He proceeded to do this for the duration of the entire escape room. There are so many examples of similar things, I can hardly recall. People act totally insane under pressure, and you can generally lead them to do anything. As a zombie actor, I've had people scream in my face, throw things at me, fall into props, or into me, pray in every language, and to every deity, and sexually harass me in every language as well. You put on some scary makeup and suddenly even seemingly normal people say things like, "Shut up and show me your zombie tigs, beach." Okay, Uncle Marvin, calm down. Oh, lol. It's standard for us to give the players pertinent information about the room they're about to be in, without giving anything away, of course. This includes the info that there are surveillance cameras installed around the rooms, so we can see what's going on while they're inside, in case they might need help, from clues to, in rare cases, medical assistance. With that in mind, there are players who would just end up calling our attention via camera to ask for puzzle answers instead of, finding out by themselves. Now, we don't always give out hints, we tell them this beforehand, because not only does it ruin their experience, they also knowingly paid to solve the puzzles themselves. Plus, they're not the only ones we are monitoring at any given time, as there would be other players in other rooms as well. They would get so mad when they don't finish the game before the time ends. Even if they did nothing other than ask us for answers, make out in rooms, knowing there are cameras, and we are monitoring them. Some would try looking for blind spots, some just didn't care. It's just awkward. Themed motel rooms exist, and if I'm not mistaken, they cost far less than escape rooms. Break items and claim that they were already broken when they arrived. Again, we have cameras. Players are also required to sign a waiver prior to the game and listen to a few instructions before going in, so they are basically told twice that they are not supposed to break anything. We also check the room's quality before and after games. Sometimes they also have this weird idea that somehow them breaking items is our fault. Fun times. I worked at one for a few months this winter before quarantine started. One of our rooms had a clue hidden on the window blinds. You had to turn them so that the strips lined up to read a message. We had one group who saw this, and instead of lining up the blinds, they tried to remove the entire blind fixture off the window. The manager bolted upstairs to stop them, since they weren't hearing us on the intercom. I also worked at one that had a live performance angle to it, where the game masters are in the room with you dressed in character. This particular room also had a live zombie, played by myself, complete with bloody torn hospital scraps and gory makeup pursuing you through the room. One girl also wore wide contact lenses when she played zombie, and she was probably the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. There were specific rules for the zombie. I was blind, so I hunted by sound. Louder groups would inspire more aggression. I also avoided the spotlights in the room, which acted as a timer. They had 5 of them, and every 12 minutes one would go out, allowing me more freedom to pursue the players. If the zombie makes contact with you, you're stuck in a quarantine booth for the rest of the game, unable to interact with the room. but still able to speak to the group. Of course, maybe once or twice a week we would get middle school/high school kids who got overexcited and would throw objects in the room at us. The only dangerous thing we had in that room to throw was a metal hook, and that was only thrown at me once. Luckily the kid's throw went super wide and the game master playing the mad scientist immediately broke character and told the kid to absolutely not do that again. Not a worker, but just wanted to give a shout out to the 2 guys who hosted the escape room I did with my wife a few months ago. We tried a 5 to 8 person room as just us 2 and did pretty well, but got stuck on one exceptionally difficult puzzle around the middle point. They gave us a bit of extra direction for that one and even gave us a few extra minutes when we were right at the end with 30 seconds on the clock. At the end, we escaped. They explained the specific puzzle had just been given a brand new layer of difficulty, and every group that day had failed it. We apparently came surprisingly close to solving it, possibly because it had so many moving pieces. Figuratively speaking, and being a smaller group, we could remain more focused on the task and not get distracted with a bunch of ideas being thrown around. This led to close to an extra hour or so where they just chatted with us about our thoughts on the puzzle, exchanging ideas and telling us a bit about the puzzle making process. They asked us about where we felt we got stuck, what was obvious, and what was too confusing, etc. And it sounded like they really took some of our feedback seriously to adjust the puzzle to make it more manageable for future parties. By the way, this was past midnight. We had reserved the final slot of the evening and the hosts were just so awesome about everything, staying late with us and showing a bit of a side of escape rooms that we might have never gotten to see otherwise. I don't know if that's common practice among escape room workers, but our experience was incredible overall. We were worried about being a bother and keeping them so late. We thanked them for sticking around, knowing they still had to clean up and put everything back in place, and they reassured us they love being able to talk about it and hear our thoughts. Seriously can't wait to go back, and the other room I haven't done there yet. So many, countless. A guy who came alone and joined another group of players. He started tidying up the mess and cleaning the room compulsively. It was an haunted house purposely designed to be messy, didn't talk to anyone from the group, and never even tried to get engaged in enigmas. After the whole room was tidied up with chairs perfectly aligned, doors closed and object put into what he thought it was the right place, he asked to be let out from the room, with great relief for poor other players. I told him I was sorry the room didn't please him as the usual pre-made excuse. He started shaking his head and chest back and forward and staring at me with bullseyes through his little glasses. He said his first words, "It was dark and messy. It was messy and dark. Your room is messy. I tidied it up. Things were not in the right place. I put them in the right place. I didn't like it. Now they are in the right place. But it was messy. Keep it tidied up. It was dark. It was messy." I gave a big smile, apologized again and told him that it was our fault we didn't take enough care of the room. I gently got him at the door, and with a last horrified look he told me, "And the enigmas were awful," and he faded in the night. Another episode, I was acting as the sadist killer in the room. I asked for a victim to be whipped on his back. The chain I used was metallic, but I used to be very gentle and careful in order to not hurt anyone, and I'm happy to say in a year it never happened. A beautiful woman offered herself as the victim. Everybody had big fun during the torture. Other players were asking to whip her harder and she faked to scream in pain just to stay at the game. Her screams had something sexual. But I really didn't find it weird, because most of people of both sexes see it as something from BDSM and sexualize the thing just for fun. What I found weird was when I was on the point of leaving the room and take off my mask as my task as an actor was over. She grabbed me. She wasn't scared by my disfigured mask and looked into my eyes, put her body very near to me, and with huge innuendo she said, "A pity you are leaving, but when this is over, you'll need to whip me again, and harder." No follow up. Already posted on here, but this is a separate event in the same theme room. There was statue of a titan that moves to the left and revealed a small crawl space somebody had to crawl into and pull the lever for the next puzzle. You can usually tell right off the bat which people are logical thinkers. figurative thinkers, and others who've never tried a puzzle in their life. Well, these three took cool for this college-aged guys. We are actually the smartest ones in the group and figured out most of the puzzles and contributed a lot to the rest of them. So they get towards the end, they get to the statue, the group agrees on using their final hint. I don't even remember the hint, but there was a book given to them that basically drew it out, and I told them the name of the statue, which is one of the titans. After 10 minutes of trying to figure it out, the group decides to all kneel, like he's a king walking down an aisle, which they were the first group I've ever seen do that. Of course, the college dudes didn't kneel, looked at each other, and busted out laughing, telling them that's not it. The group responded by telling them to kneel, and little work point. That started a small argument, so I stepped in on the mic and said I just wanna say he's a titan, not a god. They all said oh, then finally stood up point again, like most groups for this theme, got to the final puzzle, and got stuck point edit, a word. Went to one for my father-in-law's birthday. It was a zombie themed one. The room resembled a disheveled office with a bathroom on the side. The zombie was chained to the bathroom, and as time went on the chain got longer. There was also a game master inside the room with us. We were a large group, and it was an absolute clusterfuck with no one communicating or working together. Every 10 or so minutes the zombie would feed where the actress would mime eating brains, and would not interact with players. This was to give us a chance to explore the bathroom for clues. For some reason part of our group fixated on a small wooden panel in the bathroom towards the ceiling. No one could reach it normally, but there was a sink mounted to the wall under it. The sink was only mounted to the wall, nothing else supporting it. Members of our group convinced my wife to hop on top of the sink and try to open the panel when the zombie was feeding. She was on top of it for all of 2 seconds before it broke off the wall and shattered all over the floor. At the time I was doing service plumbing for a living, but no one thought to run this brilliant plan by me, lol. Nobody got hurt thankfully. I did let the zombie know to avoid kneeling/crawling in the bathroom, as broken porcelain is no joke. She growled at me point. We did not solve the room. Escape room worker here. I've seen lots of absurd things that players have done, but to me, I think the more absurd stuff is when you see them blatantly do things you tell them not to do and try and act like it never happened. This didn't happen to me, but it happened during my shift to a coworker. He had a group of foreigners come play cause my boss decided to put coupons for foreigners on some foreign website for more business, and most couldn't speak English except for a couple of them who could speak in basic conversational English. He handed them the walkie-talkies for hints, gave them the usual spiel, but specifically said for the room they were in, to not force any doors open. The doors in that room would slide open when all the puzzles of the room they were in were solved properly. 10 minutes into the game, we see them in the other rooms and we think that's impossible. Half the puzzles haven't even been solved yet. He asks them on the walkie-talkie how they managed to get in so quickly, and we see on the camera the guy holding it look at the walkie as we were talking, then turns it off and puts it back in his pocket. At this point he goes in to find out what happened. They make some excuse saying the doors opened on their own. He doesn't believe it, so he asks them to exit the room and wait in the lobby, which they do. We tell them there's no way the door just opened on its own without all the puzzles being solved. They are stubborn and swear the door opened on its own. We go back to check the cameras, only to see them sticking their fingers through a small gap in the door and forcing them to slide open, which breaks the mechanism that opens the door, which he told them not to open, and even pointed at the doors when he showed them inside and said do not open. He denied completely, but then we show them the video footage of them deliberately forcing the doors open. The guy who was combating us then just smirks cause he knows he's being caught and scoffs and just sits in the lobby with the rest of his friends on their phones, ignoring us. We eventually kick them out. They then have the gall to leave us a 1-star review saying that we left the doors open and got mad at them and didn't even let them finish the game, nor did we offer them a refund. Point the nerve of some people. So maybe not exactly what you're asking here, but we did an escape room in Buffalo, New York about 18 MOs ago. We get to within 5 minutes of the place. It's an hour drive, and the guy texts saying his card reader is broken, so it's cash only. First red flag. We find an ATM and proceed When we get there the guy isn't even at the place, but there's dog shit smeared all over the floor of the lobby like someone tried to clean it up with a dry broom. Host shows up 20 minutes later, very apologetic, in a Tesla. He refuses to close a door to the Tesla. Says it was broken into, and if he closes it it'll stay locked. Second red flag. As soon as we're in the room we notice there's zero imagination. It's literally just a bed, a couch, a couple dressers, and a broken TV. All of this stuff looked like it was thrown out at Goodwill for being too nasty. We find a blacklight flashlight with no batteries. We look for batteries for like 45 minutes. We can't get an answer out of the host on the intercom. I leave after another 45 minutes and find him passed out in his Tesla. Total time 1:30 at this point. He tells us the batteries are a mistake and texts us all the combinations to the locks in that room. He says he's going to McDonald's and asks if we want anything. We tell him we aren't going to eat anything he brings us. There's just a door on the side of the room with like 6 locks on it, and the combos were all just drawn on the walls in invisible ink. There are no batteries. Host needed the batteries for his TV remote in the lobby, so he just took them and forgot. Point. The business owner next door says the same guy keeps scamming people and just changes the business name every time he gets bad Yelp reviews. He also says it's the first time he's ever seen the Tesla. I don't work there, but I did a Christmas themed escape room with a couple of friends and we were not the greatest escape artists. It took us a good bit of time and a hint or two to get out of the first of 3 rooms, and while in the second room, one of the girls pressed the enter button on the keypad without entering any code at all. This prompted a bookcase to slide out of the way, revealing a secret passage. Surely we were on the right track. Point. Both girls enter the secret passage, let out loud screams and run away, almost collapsing on the floor. Naturally, I decide to go check out what scared them so much in the secret passage. Point. The most striking thing in this dark cavern behind the bookshelf is an 8-foot tall hyper-realistic effigy of Santa Claus. Standing just to his left is a teenage girl wearing the uniform of an escape room employee and holding a bowl of candy. The girl informs me that the secret passage opened by mistake. We are not done yet. I can't have any of her candy, and we must go back out and finish the rest of the escape room. Point. The other escape room employees came over the intercom to make sure the girls were okay and apologize for the mistake. Apparently just pressing enter on the keypad was enough to open the door if the last group to use the escape room had finished the puzzle and entered the correct code. We eventually finished the puzzle and met Santa and his little helper the correct way, and she did give us the candy the second time. I worked at an escape room venue for the better part of 3 years. A few of the more notable stories are awkward family arguments, where it's obvious the father has anger issues, to the point where it's incredibly uncomfortable to watch as they get more and more frustrated. Our build/repair guys leaving a cordless drill in one of the rooms and my watching in horror as a group tried to use it to unscrew a puzzle podium from the wall. Thankfully it was dead, and I ran in there before any real damage could be done. Our first room, which eventually got remodeled, had a puzzle involving filling a barrel with water to make a key float to the top of the tube. Well, the float we used somehow got saturated and didn't float up, so the group decided to turn the barrel upside down to get the key. So yeah, had to take an extra 10 minutes to mop up the floor after that one. In our horror themed room, people would get scared and then complain about not being able to play the game. Why would you pick the scary room if you don't want to be scared? Drunks. Drunks were either the best or worst groups. I've had amazing drunk groups who laughed at my jokes during the rules/room story setup and who used the radio to joke with me more when they needed clues, and they were some of my favorites. But the bad drunk groups, on the other hand, the less said, the better. Indignant people who clearly weren't understanding the puzzles and clues, but got angry because they insisted it was our fault. Look, Karen, I'm sorry you can't grasp simple math, but that doesn't mean I'm the asshole. Point. There's a ton more stuff, but I don't think it's anywhere near the level of absurdity of stuff I've already listed. Point. I miss it though. I miss my co-workers more than the actual job, but I miss it all the same. There were so many when I worked as a games host, but there was 3 incidents that I remember most. I didn't witness them, but they were things that had happened prior to me working there, and my colleagues told me at the time. A couple were in one of our rooms that were horror themed, and when you first start the game it's pitch black, and you need to find a way to turn on the lights. Anyway, this couple were moaning at each other the whole time, and not in a good way. Essentially they kept muttering things under their breaths, getting annoyed when small puzzles couldn't be solved. My colleague tried to send them hints every now and then to get them focused on the game, but that didn't work. I think about halfway through their arguments escalated, and the women screamed at the camera and said something along the lines of "I'm done. I've had enough of you. I wanna end it. Get me out. I wanna leave." My colleague went in and unlocked the doors and she stormed out without saying anything. The guy followed and said, "Thanks sir, sorry you had to see that." They went out, and the man walked to the right and the women walked to the left, which was a dead end by the way, so you see her walk past again a few minimums later, but yeah, it was super awkward. Another couple came, and I'm so thankful I didn't host this game. It was a lady and her boyfriend and they picked the horror themed room. The guy was on crutches, so my colleague offered him a chair to put into the game to help him out in case he was in pain from standing too long. Anyways, they were playing the game, and throughout you could hear them flirt with each other and say things like "Oh you're so smart, "Oh you're so strong." Then I think 20 minutes in, after going through the first room, they started to touching and making out with each other, and the girl jumped onto the guy and they carried on by dry humping while she was in midair and he was holding her the whole time. It was so awkward cause my colleague wasn't sure what to do. Nothing like that had happened before. My boss came and told her to put on the sound for losing and get them out cause there are families in the next room. When debriefing she was like, "Oh sorry you lost. Did you have fun?" And the guy was like, "Oh yeah, loved the puzzles. Shame we didn't make it." The girl looked really embarrassed. Anyways, they left and he proceeded to exit with back on his crutches, even though he had the strength to hold her up the whole time. Till this day, if we talk about the incident, she's always says, "Ugh, I can still remembering hearing them through my earpiece." There was a wedding proposal being held in one of our other rooms. It was a police themed one, and you had to break someone out of the room. Basically at the end, if you win there's a life-size ish plush person that greets you in his jail cell / room. He doesn't move or anything. He's just kind slumped on the floor, haha. But anyhow, I thought he was cute. The guy asked for the letter to be placed at the end with the plush so he can propose with it at the end of the game. So this is what happened. The music switched off cause when you finish the game you get this applauding soundtrack and then the briefing music comes back on, but they switched it off cause it was a reci. So for the wedding proposal he put the letter in the room W. The Rios moment. She was so scared not knowing what the slumped over thing was she refused to go up to it. The guy kept waving her to come over, but she just stood so far, so it took a bit of convincing to go over. When the girl read the note she didn't fully understand it at first and reread it after she looked up and was like, "You're proposing to me?" And he was like, "Yes. Will you marry me?" And she was like, "You're proposing here." Obviously she looked super unimpressed with that response. So my god, it was so AWK cause the music was off. He was waiting for her to answer. She was disappointed cause she probs wanted a super romantic styled proposal, but instead she got a dead plush in a dead silent room in a police office styled room. Anyway, she said yes, I think reluctantly cause she remembered PPL were watching and he was waiting for her to answer etc. Then my colleague had to debrief and was like congratulating her, and she was so unimpressed he just felt the air in the room was uncomfortable. After that, when PPL wanted to do events in escape rooms, we kinda double check to see if they are 100% sure. There were more incidents that happened, but these ones I remember vividly. They're probs not that interesting, but were interesting to me. This is a story of my friends and I doing an escape room, and hopefully the employee is here in the thread. My friends and I escape room junkies. Here in Toronto there are only a few good options. We went to this one escape room and we got the standard rules. Don't touch this or that, or stick a finger in this, blah blah blah. The weird one we got was don't touch the statue cause it's greasy, old, and due to collapse. We took a rather odd note. Deep into the puzzle we found two statues, one at the beginning and the other near the end. The one near the end was more exposed than the first. Nothing to preventing players from bumping into it or give off the signal of don't touch. This must have been the weird statue. My friends and I started taunting the statue cause of the hooligans we are. We started stuff like what you looking at to stuff like wanna take this to my place. We did a lot of weird stuff. At one point we started looking through the eye holes. We actually did worse than it sounds, but I'll keep it to ourselves. We were almost done the final puzzle till we heard metal move. We look up to see the arm in a different place. Then it started to point. At first we thought there was an automated bot. There's no way it just stood there until everything. But then the motions looked too fluid. There was an actual human being in the suit. As we walked out, she, emphasis on the she due to the previous remarks we made, it what we thought was an it, started laughing and waving at us as we left. TLDR, at an escape room, my friends and I accidentally harass an employee for 10 minutes straight. TLDR, drunk group didn't follow the rules very well. Tried to break down a door with a rolled up carpet. So I worked at an escape room place for 1.5 to 2 years. One of my favorite stories to tell is from within my first 2 months working there. Late one night a group came in to play our Sherlock Holmes themed room. They had obviously been drinking before coming, so I assumed it would be a hell of a time watching them try to solve puzzles. They were pretty entertaining trying to sign in and get ready, so I was chatting with them and trying to make sure they would like me so they would be more likely to listen to my rules. Standard tactics I used, especially when alcohol was involved. This time, didn't go as well. I take them into the room and run them through all the rules. One of the final rules that we give for that room is to not touch a carpet on the ground because it is just for decoration. Lots of people assume it has a secret code or trapdoor under it, but it's just there to protect the floors a bit. I get their game going and head into our control room to monitor them. About 20 to 30 minutes in, and everything's going pretty well. My boss and I are laughing over some of the shit they're doing, and there's no problems. Boss decides to go out for a smoke break and I of course am still watching the game. I get a phone call, and so I look away from the screens for a minute or two to grab the phone, see what the person is calling for, and get my computer set up to help the person on the phone. Well, all of a sudden, I heard a thud. I look at the cameras confused as hell to find that my group using the carpet as a battering ram to attempt to open a secret door they had found. I ran with the phone attempting to tell the person I needed them to hold for a second as I burst into the room to the second thud. I asked what the hell they were doing, and they told me they assumed they needed to use it to get into the door because the puzzle they solved wouldn't open it. Well, turns out they never actually input the answer in any way, shape or form. Upon showing them where and how to answer the puzzle, the door popped, and they all slowly worked on putting the carpet back and were walking around with their heads down like guilty kids the rest of the game. In the end I made sure nothing was broken, no damage luckily. They apologized profusely and then proceeded to tip me like $60, $20 from 3 different people, and one even asked for my drink of choice and bought me a bottle of whiskey from the liquor store next door as an apology. Could have been a lot worse, but the level to which some people think escape rooms are made is still astonishing to me. I worked for a little over a year at an escape room. We had cameras and microphones in the room, obviously, so we could see everything going on. What other people in this thread have said is true. We had to routinely tell people not to stick things into power outlets, that the thermostat in the room is just a thermostat, that the door does not come off its hinges, the ceiling tiles shouldn't be messed with, that the carpet should not be pulled up from the floor, that then furniture bolted into the ground should not be tugged at. We still had some people occasionally manage to unbolt furniture though, despite already saying this to them prior to the game. At this escape room, they would sometimes allow up to 10 people into the room for birthday parties, though not ideal. One time we had a group of 10, 12-year-old kids there for a birthday party. They were totally fine. Didn't do anything too crazy. I don't recall many, if any, groups of kids being much of a problem. It was the older people that made things rough. They would mess with the thermostat. One group put it up to like 90 degrees F, move all movable furniture to the other side of the room. They would take down all the paintings in the room, even though we told them numerous times over and over again to not take them off the walls. If you really want to piss off the people who work at an escape room, do what this group did. Move everything around so that it takes you far longer to reset everything in the room for the next group. Other groups would hide keys, maybe accidentally, I don't know, and we would have all staff in the room looking for a key, only to find it under the carpeting or something. So yeah. I've seen some pretty stupid people, and it's, unfortunately, all but uncommon to have a game where we did not have to interact with the people playing to make sure that they didn't do anything stupid. Copied comment from another thread. Sure as hell the strangest thing to ever happen at work for me. Nice. Finally one that I can answer. So I work as an escape room game master. To those of you that don't know what an escape room is, people pay to get locked into a room that is filled with tasks and riddles, and they have to solve them in the time span of 60 minutes in order to free themselves. I'm the guy that explains the game to them, and I supervise them during in my office, where I have cameras showing all 3 rooms. If they are stuck somewhere, I help them. So there once was a couple that had booked our hardest room, and when they entered I could tell that they were pretty drunk. Not unusual, we often get those in the evening hours. I started to introduce them to the room and tried to get them excited for the game. Oh, they were excited alright, but not for the game. They barely listened to me. The guy was busy with sucking on his girlfriend's earlobe. I asked them whether they were sure they wanted to play and not just head home. They chuckled and said they'd try to keep their act together. So I sent them in the room and made my way to the office. Well, at the beginning they actually tried to solve the riddles, but failed to do so due to their inebriated state. So I had to help them with every single task, basically just telling them exactly what to do, even the real easy stuff. They were unable to solve any task on their own, but yet felt the need to celebrate each completion of a task with a 2-minute makeout session. At this point I knew they wouldn't get through to the end of the room, but they didn't really seem to mind. Also the other groups that were playing needed some help as well, so I stopped giving them the solutions. So a few minutes later, Rank, you have to give us more advice or she's gonna blow me right here. Feel free to watch if you want. I couldn't believe them. I had never seen anyone behave so promiscuously in public. Also I'm not a voyeur. Felt like they wanted me to be there, which made me slightly uncomfortable. I was amused, but I also wanted to do my job right. So I answered, I'm all for free love, but there is a place and time for it, and it is neither here nor now. Also I'm the one who would have to clean up your mess, so please just try to play the game, okay? And they agreed grudgingly. They still fondled each other, but kept it mostly civil, so I let them play until their 60 minutes were up. Afterwards they paid and chilled on our waiting couch and just talked, so I figured they'd probably leave soon. So I gathered the next group and went to the entrance of the room to give them the introduction. When I looked down the corridor, I saw that the horny couple weren't on the couch anymore, and I was relieved, thinking they had left. Well, I stood to be corrected, because the next thing I saw was a guest opening the door to the men's room, and I watched his face go from mild surprise to bewilderment and next embarrassment, and he quickly closed the door again. I knew this meant those two were going to pound town on our toilet. I just didn't have the energy and will to stop them, so I just continued with the introduction. Also the toilets are not my responsibility, so yeah. When I got back to the office I asked my coworker whether the crazy couple had left, and he confirmed that indeed they had. He saw them leaving in a hurry. Few minutes later the same coworker came over to me telling me the sink in the men's room didn't have running water anymore. So I went in there with gloves and checked everything. I felt like I was investigating a crime scene. I saw that the tap that regulated the water flow to the sink was right next to the toilet. So I reconstructed the scene and figured the woman had probably held onto that tap while mounting the guy and had probably turned it off in the process. All other guests we had at that time knew exactly what had gone down in there and looked at me with a mix of embarrassment, amusement, and pity. I do think it was not a nice thing of them to do, but they didn't make a mess or anything, so I just shrugged and thought to myself, at least this shift wasn't boring. I worked at an escape room for nearly 2 years in college. Some highlights in no particular order. 1. Group that didn't understand how keys work. I started panicking watching them on the cameras because they seemed to be doing all the right stuff, but somehow didn't have any of the doors or boxes or cabinets or anything open. I thought I had reset the room wrong, or that the locks were broken or something, which sucks but can happen. So after 5 minutes or so I physically went into the room to check what the fuck was happening, and I see all the keys stacked in a little pile on the floor, in a corner just out of view of the cameras. Turned out they had been putting keys into locks, but not turning them. So they had concluded that all the keys were red herrings, stacked them in the corner, and forgotten them. Their group did not escape. 2. Group that went to a local cemetery at 9 PM instead of our downtown location because they misunderstood our promotional materials about our new mausoleum themed room 3. We had open bookings at our escape room, so that meant you could end up thrown in with total strangers if you didn't buy all the available tickets for a particular room/time. The worst combination I saw. An extremely awkward teenage boy came in, whose mother had bought him a single ticket in a 6-person room. He was wearing a t-shirt that said sarcastic comment loading and seemed very depressed. The strangers who had booked the other tickets in the room were about 10 minutes late, which made the teenage boy even more listless and upset. They were a married couple, and as they came through the door, the husband was verbally assaulting his wife for faking up the directions again. I put them all in the room, and it was awful. The husband spends the whole time berating his wife, repeatedly calling her stupid and insulting her ideas. The teenage boy just wanders around the room and does literally nothing. Like, he barely interacts with any objects in the room and doesn't speak to the couple at all. The woman is the only one who is trying/doing anything, but she is so beaten down by her horrible husband that they basically make it nowhere after an hour. I was relieved to let them out and send them on their way, but I still shudder thinking about having to watch the 3 of them. I'm currently going on my 3rd year of working an escape room/haunted house/axe throwing attraction. Our most popular escape room is our zombie room, which requires an actor as a zombie and an actor as a butler/zombie handler. So if something happens in the room, there is someone physically there to take care of it. Originally the room was meant to have just the zombie, but people kept trying to literally attack the actor, like full on kill, so we had to have a butler there to deter violence. Plenty of times people have peed themselves in the room. We ask them to use the bathroom no less than 10 times before the room commences, and some are too embarrassed to ask to go mid-game, so they end up throwing their undies away in our garbage cans. We tell them time and time again none of our escape rooms require you to break anything. What happens? The zombie room is broken almost on a daily. Small lockboxes torn in half by muscle men, wires torn out of places by others, etc. I've even seen people purposefully use items in the room to shorten the zombie chain, which ends in extensive wasted time between shows just trying to untangle the chain instead of resetting the room. My favorite, most memorable thing is getting a whole room of army men singing Barbie Girl together. They were real into it and knew more than the chorus. Another time I had them do a runway walk to get a clue, and a dude who was rather heavy set and highly scared broke out of his shell and did a strut like no other. He proclaimed to the room his stage name as Liquid Adonis. Zombie had to hide for a solid 5 minutes to try and not laugh in front of the customers. Many times we've had a room of people act like savages. They don't listen to the butler giving them hints. They antagonize/threaten the zombie. They immediately break rules of no running/jumping/throwing things and end up not solving the room because they refuse to listen to the butler or to quit antagonizing the zombie. You leave the zombie alone, you have better chances of escaping. Zombies have feelings too. I once was butler when a religious group of kids from the country wanted to treat themselves to the city. They went in our zombie room, and it was chaos. At the end they couldn't stop asking me questions about the room, how it worked, etc., and a majority of them wondered how we got a real live zombie. I wanted to answer all their questions, but we were running low on time, so I had to shoo them to the lobby. A few young ones asked if they'd see me again, and, being in character, our butler is a creepy/sassy type. I proclaimed, if you ever wake up from a nightmare about a zombie, just look into the cornfields, and I'll be there waiting. Needless to say, a few of them started crying. Apparently they all live near a cornfield. I have way more stories than that, but these are my favorite. TLDR. Escape rooms are where customers act like crackheads sometimes. Other times the most wonderful series of events unfold. Not a worker, but a player. A couple months ago before my state's lockdown, my friends did 2 escape rooms. During the second one, which was Friday the 13th, themed employee could come and rest as Jason, and if you got tapped by a plastic machete you have to stand on a X whenever he comes in or game over. During the escape room we had about 11 people and the room wasn't that big. Whenever Jason came in we all ran one way or the other, which ended up with one girl getting her finger cut open on a painting and my head getting smashed against a thermostat. We both left the room for a couple minutes to calm down. The lights had been turned on by the time I got back. The lights were off, which gave a red eerie glow to the area, and you needed to solve the puzzle to get the lights on. I remember multiple times while running from Jason we would accidentally knock over a plant or get pushed against a wall because of how many people were in the room and moving around. We all surprisingly made it out in time, and not to mention some friends taunted Jason and he would run after them. Me and 2 guys ended up untagged, so win-win for the girl that got her head smashed against a thermostat. But I can thank one of the guys shielding me from Jason because of my slight anxiety. If you were there you would have seen my meltdown and how frightened I was. Honestly it was not that absurd I guess, but some of the annoying TikTok girls of my friend group were just singing some audios from TikTok to taunt the Jason. I low-key feel bad for the worker playing Jason though. From my wife's time working there. Story 1. Someone literally took a sheet in the corner, on camera. Story 2. Anonymized. So there was an ex-NFL player who used to come through the place from time to time, and he came to check out the new room with one of his NFL buddies and his wife. The new room's theme is meant to be like a cheeky meter thing, where an ex-employee decides to get back at customers who left him bad Yelp reviews. Employee #1, walking them through the intro, does the scripted thing, where she goes to check on rumors that problematic ex-employee has returned to stir up trouble. NFL players and wife demand details. What does he look like? Etc. Employee, not great at improv, describes a 6-foot average looking white guy and leaves the room in a huff. Meanwhile there's a malfunction in the room setup, so the hydraulic pumps need to be reset. Each one pops in succession, a room away from where NFL players are hanging out. Employee #2, who just so happens to be a 6-foot average looking white guy, decides that this is a good moment to say hello to an NFL player who is actually a childhood hero of his and his favorite ever player. He bursts in the room to say hello. NFL players and wife, not understanding that this is a scripted thing and believing the pop sounds to be gunfire, believe that they've caught a mass shooter. Wife runs out to get her phone from the lobby to call 911. NFL player 2, a former lineman, grabs employee 2 and is about to beat the crap out of him before manager runs in to avert catastrophe. NFL player puts up a Facebook video about it the next day. He gets some free rooms as a sorry you thought it was a mass shooting, and they reworked the intro. I have 2 stories. The second, I was a legit worker having been paid to design a puzzle. That story is, and I imagine shall forever be, my go-to meditative focus when contemplating the inanity of the universe we find ourselves in. For the first one though, while I was technically a salaried worker attending a mandatory work event, in a much more accurate sense I was a player. So I'm on a work team building session that features a literal escape the room via the locked door by solving all the puzzles to get the final key gimmick. A haughty prepper, there's probably a better description but this gives you the idea. Co-worker picked the final lock with a wallet lockpick kit. He kept it in his wallet, if you were wondering, within about 20 seconds of starting, and was so faking proud of himself. I can't describe the smug self-satisfaction oozing off of this guy. I'd bet he's on this very Reddit thread today still telling the story, with a few adjustments of the truth of course. For you see, after a few glorious moments of his, what later turned out to be for the rest of us, oh so juicy gloating, it was quickly communicated to us all that the door was never actually locked. I mean, obvious safety concern, right? What he had been fiddling with was really no more than a mostly empty hole drilled into the wooden door with a painted brass plate on top or some shit like that. A little under an hour later we had solved all the puzzles to get the novel ridiculously oversized golden key prop that fit in the lock he had expertly picked earlier, haha. He played it off as if he had immediately recognized the door wasn't locked and did it for a joke. Clever enough response to save face, but I witnessed that childlike giddiness when he thought all his well-documented online efforts had just yielded such spectacular results, and it couldn't have been faked. To this day I relish seeing the realization dawn on him. Juicy point. But onto the second story. Here I was legit a worker, in that I had been paid to design and build an electronic wiring puzzle. Didn't get to see anything in person but heard about the absurdity later on from the gal who had hired me. Her email was just titled so, and to this day it is the only thing in my Gmail inbox that I have starred as important. I really should print out a hard copy or something. Point. I had made a puzzle that consisted of a microcontroller that articulated a servo to unlock a drawer if the players connected some tinfoil to the correct terminals of a screws-inward pseudo plug board thingy in the correct order, based on a diagram or some other sheet that they could find. Basically they built a cut the red wire situation and then had to cut the red wire. Actually that's not really that relevant to what ended up happening, but electronics were definitely in play, so it sets the tone. The story told to me is that a player had pulled a prominently not part of the game labeled stick-on smoke detector from a wall mount and placed it on the board where the tinfoil wiring was intended to be done. They then took the 9V battery out of the smoke detector and began to short the battery with the tinfoil. All this in an attempt to set off the smoke alarm that they had just bloody removed the only power source from. To top it all off, the manager noticed on the video feed when they heard the player's loud sustained screeching. This was later attributed to attempting to vocally mimic what the frequency of the smoke alarm might be. I mean, ignoring the disregard of safety signage. Ignoring the attempt to start a fire by shorting a battery in a casual game room. Even ignoring the thought that loud yelling would do the job just as sufficiently as anything else. What really gets to me is the profound underlying logical steps involved. Dismantle a smoke detector, rendering it unable to detect smoke. In order to be able to produce smoke, to try and trigger the smoke detector you just dismantled and rendered unable to detect smoke. It's beautiful. It's faking fundamental, one seemingly necessary actions to obtain a result so perfectly and irrevocably limiting their ability to achieve that result. The reversibility of the situation where realizing that the smoke detector won't work with the battery out prevents your ability to create smoke. Short toss in the comedic absurdity, rooted in ironically causing a fire with a smoke detector, but it's the ease with which somebody could end up doing this in an unintended step by beautiful step manner that takes the cake. Point. Edit. I hope that, like me, when you encounter unexpected/unintended behavior in the wild, you too take comfort in knowing that such a thing as this can and has happened. Somehow it makes everything else worth it. Escape room worker here. Point. Destroy things, mostly, like, things are bolted down, and meat hands always tries to muscle it out/off of whatever it is affixed to. Point. Picture frame bolted to the wall. Get your fingertips beneath it and tear it out of the wall. Cabinet bolted to the floor. Shoulder it out of place, ripping the bottom of the entire cabinet off. Armoire with locked doors. Tear the entire door off. Magnetic lock you just opened. Dismantle the entire lock for no reason at all. Wires running to a mechanism. Tear out the wires. Tantrums. A lot of tantrums. Mostly adults. Adults become frustrated and end up reverting to childish behavior to express their displeasure. Threatening to quit or leave bad reviews. Children also have tantrums, but far less often than adults. Children mostly beg, which I never respond to. I refuse to reward bad behavior like begging and become sullen. Occasionally, one guy will be grabby with his date/girlfriend/wife. I often remind them that we are watching and that's enough to stop them. Rarely, we also get nudity, mostly PG-13. The very rarest of cases will result in more, but I try to warn them before it gets there, and reminding them that everything in the rooms is recorded helps. As the years have passed, we have had to redesign puzzles to make the rooms safer or tougher. We used to have a puzzle where participants would find a small bottle of water. It was supposed to be poured into a bottle bolted to the top of a barrel. This would cause a cork in a bottle across the room to float out of it. We never changed that water. So it was filthy. And yet, people still tried to drink it. A lady changed a diaper in a room. Once. Spilled drinks. All the spilled drinks. Lacerations. Having to follow the trail of blood of the guy who cut his hand on a lock as he walked through the lobby to the restroom. One of our rooms is designed to be frightening. We don't do actors, too many tough guys reacting with violence, and no animatronics, too much of a risk of people being too close and getting whacked, so we just play sudden frightening noises. Timing is important. Play the right sound at the right time and people will absolutely jump. One time a guy stumbled backwards in terror into the rest of his group and put his foot through a box on the floor. We generally don't recommend younger people do the frightening room, but we trust an adult to make that determination for the younger members of their party. Once, I built the tension with subtle sounds before unleashing a loud noise that literally scared the shit out of a kid. He left the room and went to the restroom before remaining in the lobby to wait for the rest of his party to finish. When I went in to reset the room, there was a noticeable odor, but no physical evidence. Our rooms are accessible to everyone, so no handcuffs, crawling or blindfolds. I know it's not as exciting as being handcuffed to something, but I dare you to handcuff an octogenarian to a bedpost or radiator. Not gonna happen. The hardest thing to get most people to understand is that we are not trying to defeat you with our room/puzzles. It doesn't bother us at all win or lose. We just want you to have fun. Most folks would have more fun being walked through the room, which defeats the purpose of doing the room in the first place. Some folks are more upset when you give them more help, insisting on figuring it out themselves. These are best types of folks, only asking for one of 3 available clues. When they need it. You only get 3 clues. We cover this in the safety video we show you at the beginning. I also explain this when I get the team into the room. Despite this, people get frustrated when they blow through their clues in the beginning and then want more. We absolutely talk shit in the control room. We are genuinely happy when folks figure things out and move forward. We definitely ridicule folks who can't figure out the simplest puzzles we designed. I'm not a very smart guy, but I can figure out most of the puzzles that I didn't have a hand in. It's a collaborative thing when we design and build the rooms. We test the puzzles on each other to see if the average person can figure it out. They test the simpler puzzles on me because I can usually figure them out. The puzzles are all logic based. All of them. Occam's razor applies here. And yet, folks still draw insane parallels, go on wild tangents, and make bizarre assumptions. An escape room I used to work in had an actor pretending to be a zombie tied to one wall, and me acting as a doctor, and the participants back against the opposite wall, the one part of the room that the zombie couldn't get to. The point was to distract the zombie, so you could go on the other side of the room and look for clues. One of the ways to distract the zombie was that the lights would occasionally turn off and black light would turn on. Then the actor playing the zombie would pretend they couldn't see, and during that time you could go on the other side of the room and solve stuff. The room setting was an abandoned laboratory, so we had a lot of fake medical equipment and stuff to kind of help make the room look real. One of the key things about this place as someone running the rooms is that you weren't ever supposed to break character, but give hints relative to the setting, like you're experiencing everything for the first time with the customers. So during one of the blackout periods I see this dude wandering all around the edges of the room, but didn't say anything because he wasn't hurting anything, and the rest of his group was struggling with everything. After the lights come back on he comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I think your compass isn't working," trying to be quiet, and being so dumbfounded I literally just yelled out, "What faking compass?" and look down and see he's holding a blood pressure gauge. Dude had wandered around the room with it, thinking it was supposed to point him to something, I guess. One of our games is centered around a hacker that you have to out-hack. You have a computer terminal and have to find codes and enter them in the command prompt. Well, a guy from one of our groups, let's call him Jerry, tried random codes with hacker jargon and accidentally entered an admin command that switches the system to maintenance mode. It displays a list of other commands that we use to test different parts of the room. One of these commands was linked to the fire suppression system. Jerry thought this was part of the simulation and executed a command for a test of the fire suppression system. Now, due to the expensive equipment that makes up the rooms, we don't have a normal sprinkler system. No, our system is much more advanced. When a fire is detected, a 2-minute timer is announced, during which guests must get to the now unlocked exits. After 2 minutes the doors seal themselves and all the oxygen is drained from the room, which stops the fire. However, during an admin test of the system, it is assumed that everyone is outside the room already. We use the same admin menu in all our rooms, so our guys would be executing the command from a separate terminal, and there is number 2-minute timer. The doors sealed themselves with the group still inside, and the oxygen started draining. We were able to shut down the system before anyone was hurt, and everyone walked away from it fine. However, the room was shut down for a few weeks while we fixed it to prevent this sort of thing from happening. We didn't get sued. The family was pretty understanding, and we had a good laugh about it the next time they came to us. This one kind of fits the bill. Point back at my old job we had a you've been captured by a murderer sort of room. You're trapped in his spooky mansion and have to get out. Point now for some reason, the parents of a 13-year-old girl and all 5 of her friends decided they wanted to do this room, which can be quite spooky for adults even. Point we tried to talk them into one of the nicer ones, but no dice. So I blindfold all 6 of these 13-year-old kids and lead them into the first room. The first room is pitch black and has ambient creepy sounds. It took them 20 minutes to get up off the ground and stop screaming in fear in character. I asked them if they wanted to leave, but no, they were determined to finish the room despite having only 40 minutes left and only just have started, blindly touching things in fear to get out. Point in which case I thought fuck it. In for a penny in for a pound. Walked over with my manager and another co-worker, pulled 2 knives from the kitchen, cracked open the door the tiniest amount, and just started going at it, sharpening the knives in the most deliberate and horror movie way possible. I've never seen a group of people run so fast into a wall and fall into a pile for the next 40 minutes. They said they had fun afterwards though, somehow. That's one of the only times I've never even seen the first clue be solved. Easiest reset of my life. That doesn't answer your question, but is escape room adjacent. Point so, I'm a spoiler spaz. I hate spoilers of any kind. When I absorb a narrative or any media, I want to go in fresh. Not a word, not a whiff, just blank canvas. So I'm in the escape room on my birthday. All of my friends and family know me and my spaz Y tendencies. They know that I want to participate in each step of the process and that I want to figure it all out with them, not have something be found and opened while I'm looking elsewhere. When we go in, the employee lets us in and tells us that they can see us from the cameras and to push this big red button if we need help or we if want to be let out for any kind of emergency. Point well, this motherfucker would not shut his mouth. I'm looking at some prop bone, turning it over in my hands, and I set it down. The guy comes on the overhead, unprovoked, and says try looking at it again from another angle. Beach did I faking ask, but it's my birthday, and I'm not trying to be a dickhead and ruin the day by getting mad. Point, but that faker did it 2 more times. He completely ruined the reward of solving this puzzle. Fact that dude. Point I paid for this experience, to be locked in a room, and try to solve my way out. How dare you tell me the faking answers? I'm mad just thinking about it. If you can't quietly watch someone solve, or not solve, a puzzle, then you shouldn't be working at a faking escape room. Literally, I don't understand what must have been going through their head. You think I just want to pay you so you can tell me how to get out of this fake trap? It's made up. It is literally designed so that the result is discoverable. Shut the fuck up. I got so many stories, but here's one I'll always remember. One of our escape rooms has an incinerator that must be opened up first, and then someone has to climb some steps into it. No, it's not a real incinerator. In order to press a button inside it, someone has to press this button, and another person has to pull a lever elsewhere in order to drop open a hidden panel to a secret room. This hidden panel makes up one of the walls of the incinerator, and gravity likes to slam it down, making a loud noise and potentially startling whoever is inside the incinerator. One time, I had a group of ladies in their 30s doing this room, one of which was very heavily pregnant. These ladies were real jumpy, and this room, apart from a few loud noises, isn't meant to be scary. The slightest sound or sudden movement would send them all running for each other point. So the ladies managed to open the incinerator. It opens on its own when a puzzle is solved, and the ladies all clutched each other. Seeing the button inside the incinerator, they knew what they had to do, but they were all too scared to climb into the incinerator. To push the button point, guess who was peer pressured into climbing inside the incinerator? The pregnant one. I watched the camera with my mouth agape as this pregnant lady struggled to climb the steps into the incinerator, while everyone else clutched each other. The incinerator is not that big either, and the poor lady had to pretty much crawl inside. To reach the button point, another lady goes to the lever and pulls it, while the pregnant lady pushes the button. The hidden panel drops, slams down, makes a loud noise, and the pregnant lady practically hurls herself feet first out of the incinerator. Her feet slipped on the stairs in her haste, she falls, and her pregnant stomach slams on the edge of a stair. I and the other ladies all hold our breath in shock, waiting for something horrible to happen. But thankfully, after several tense seconds of silence, she stood up and said she was fine, just a bit shaken. Someone else then offers to check out the secret room. They proceed as normal as can be after that. I've seen a lot of dumb shit happen in escape rooms, but this takes the cake in the being the scariest, and in some ways, the dumbest. Why the hell would you send the pregnant one to do the physical stuff, like climbing and crawling? Lady, I hope you and your baby are doing okay. Also, you need better friends. I don't work at an escape room, but I'm going to answer this anyway, as the most absurd or genius thing I did at an escape room. The room or rooms had an old-time detective feel, and we were in one small room trying to find clues to unlock the next room. While others in my group were poking around, I spotted a small square door on the wall, held closed with a combination lock. I'm pretty good at picking combination locks, and I managed to open this one and got the door open. Inside was what looked like an old-time fuse box with just 2 fuses, thinking these fuses fit well with the time depicted in the room, and not paying any attention to the fact that the building we were in was actually pretty old. I proceeded to unscrew the fuses, expecting to find the clue on the other side of the fuse point. Yep, we were cast into complete darkness. We thought it was all part of the experience, and turned on the flashlight we had found earlier. A blacklight flashlight, so it didn't help much. Then the game master opened the door, real flashlight in hand, and grabbed the fuse from me. That's not part of the game. I'll have to ask you folks to step outside while we get the computers rebooted and the room reset. When we returned, there was a handwritten sign over the fuse box. This is a real fuse box, not part of the game. Please do not touch. I don't work at an escape room, but I'm going to answer this anyway, as the most absurd or genius thing I did at an escape room. The room or rooms had an old-time detective feel, and we were in one small room trying to find clues to unlock the next room. While others in my group were poking around, I spotted a small square door on the wall, held closed with a combination lock. I'm pretty good at picking combination locks, and I managed to open this one and got the door open. Inside was what looked like an old-time fuse box with just 2 fuses, thinking these fuses fit well with the time depicted in the room, and not paying any attention to the fact that the building we were in was actually pretty old. I proceeded to unscrew the fuses, expecting to find the clue on the other side of the fuse point. Yep, we were cast into complete darkness. We thought it was all part of the experience, and turned on the flashlight we had found earlier. A blacklight flashlight, so it didn't help much. Then the game master opened the door, real flashlight in hand, and grabbed the fuse from me. That's not part of the game. I'll have to ask you folks to step outside while we get the computers rebooted and the room reset. When we returned, there was a handwritten sign over the fuse box. This is a real fuse box, not part of the game. Please do not touch. Not a worker, but I participated in one with some friends. There was a point in this escape room where there was this maze built in the wall that had a key. One side was a black wooden plank and the other was a plastic sheet, so you could see the maze and the key point. The solution was to obtain a magnet in another puzzle, and then have one player in the obscured plank guiding the key through the maze with the magnet, and another player seeing the whole thing and guiding the magnet player. Apparently we weren't the first players that tried using the magnet in the plastic sheet. One could tell by all of the scratch marks made by the magnet in the plastic sheet, but we were the first ones to have stuck the key between the maze and the plastic sheet. We thought we were so clever by hacking the system by, instead of solving the maze, dropping the key through it. But when the key got stuck and a guy had to come inside to try get the key out, we felt so stupid. Also, an aftermath, the worker that came in couldn't get the key out, so he gave us a replacement, pointed very furiously, and rightfully so, to the sticker in the plastic sheet that said "do not touch." He also gave us one of those UV lamps. We didn't understand at first, but apparently there was a puzzle we skipped because of our nerdy knowledge by solving a code very early. We found out about that when we opened a box and discovered inside another UV lamp and the code of the puzzle we already solved. We technically lost the game. We solved everything like 5 or 10 minutes after the given time, but since we were so close they gave us some extra time. That was awfully nice of them considering what we had done. Once I was leading a team through one of our rooms and they flat out didn't believe my hints. I had been helping pretty much the whole time. They had struggled pretty hard, but still seemed to be enjoying themselves, and they'd made it to this chess puzzle we have. Basically you get 5 notes that tell you where to move each piece, and they are diary entries. The writer is the black pieces, opponent is white. You're only told that the opponent uses white in the first note and you're supposed to intuit for the rest which color piece is being moved. The notes are also numbered to help more point. They had found the 5th note before the 4th. Pretty common in NBD. And this lady was announcing out loud which color she thought she needed to move. She had it wrong, but I figured that was because she hadn't found the 4th and gently directed them as to where it was. Once she had it though, she still had the colors wrong. She announced the last note was the dark pieces, and I said that it referred to the white pieces. Her response, "Are you sure about that?" I reassured her that I was, and she said, "Well, I just used the white pieces for the last note, so I don't think so." Which means she also did the note before wrong. And also was telling me I don't know the answer to my game's puzzle. Not like it's my job to know exactly how to solve these rooms or anything, obviously. I then took her through it step by step to show I was right, explaining the diary thing as above. And she just looked up at the ceiling and said, "No, that doesn't seem right." They literally wasted their last 3 minutes arguing with me over the last puzzle as I told them how to solve it. It was honestly baffling. She also tried to guilt me for more time after a thing in the room didn't work right, which I immediately caught and fixed, saving them 5 minutes of solved time. Edit. TLDR. A lady refused to believe my hints about the final puzzle and spent the rest of the group's time arguing with me over it instead of escaping. There are two that always come to mind when asked this question. 1. There was a ceramic owl statue you had to free from a glass cabinet and then place it in a marked location on a shelf. A group solves the glass cabinet and one player pulls the owl out, and I hear her say, "I wonder if anything is inside it." I look up and watch her violently twist the head of the owl, breaking it off and splitting it open. All I could think is, why on earth would you think a statue with no way to open it other than breaking it would have something inside it? And yes, directions were given at the start that nothing needed to be disassembled or broken open. Point 2. This was not one player. This one was a constant issue. There was a painting, you had to turn the light on for it, and a code would appear in shadow across the surface of the painting. The light switch was on the frame and was a standard turn knob like you would find on any lamp. The kind you rotate until you hear it click, and then it is on and turn again for another click to turn it off. Nearly every single group someone would stand there spinning the knob rapidly, hearing it click over and over as if they had never seen one of these switches in their life. They would sit there for 30 seconds making it click before giving up and walking away. If they were lucky they would stop with it on. If not, I would usually send the click click, not click 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 click. But really people, it's a freaking lamp switch. I bet you have one in your house you have used 100 times. Basically I found when people were on the clock they tended to turn off their brains. The theme was Atlantis, and you go through a door, the only door, to get into the entrance room. The puzzle was you gotta figure out how to get out to continue on the rest of your adventure, meaning one of the walls open up. It was a group of teenagers and early 20s college kids, and one dad. Not old, but he was definitely a dad. Now the entrance door, again, the only door in the room, had a button next to it that says press to exit. It's the door that the group came in from. On the other side of the door was the lobby with people walking around and everything. The dad of the group eventually looks at the door and reads the words on the button. I was just thinking, I know you're not gonna do it. The dad presses a button, opens the door, then says, guys, I figured it out, come on. I, including the entire group, just stared in disbelief. The dad just kept saying, come on, guys. The dad couldn't figure out why they weren't going with him, and I had to tell him that's not correct and that's the door they entered from. He proceeded to look around the lobby and the doorway saying, are you sure? Like, dude, really? The group actually made it to the last puzzle and couldn't figure it out. I don't blame them. I don't even understand how the answer was supposed to be interpreted from what they were given. A group of boys had come in, I'd assume for a birthday party. They rented out both rooms we had and decided to compete against which group will get out of first. We have a beginner and a harder room. The parents were nice and my coworker and I had talked to them while we watched them on feed. Now, boys are boys, and they will always be. However, these boys were not only loud after telling them not to be, but kinda destructive. Eventually, the group from our harder room got out first and started yelling at the other group from the other side of the door, which we told them not to do. It took the parents to make them calm down. The parents in which apparently had their house burned down. Once the group in the beginner room got out, I looked at how stressed my coworker looked. I asked him why. He told me that the group of boys from the beginner room had apparently torn down the curtains that covered the windows of the room. A rule we have is that you don't mess with the curtains, plus there's literally nothing around the curtains for them being pulled down on accident. Anyways, I'm resetting the harder room with my coworker and that's when the dad comes in and apologizes, which is very much appreciated, and gives my coworker a $100 bill, said for a tip or to repair it. After that, they had left. My dad had to help put the curtains back, but they didn't need changing or anything too extreme. After that, I left with my dad. My coworker gave the tip to our boss towards the escape room. I've only been working at the escape room for about 5 to 6 months, but I gotta say the job is actually very fun and great to meet and talk to new people. The parents were very nice and considerate and the kids may have been hyper to no end, but that's how kids are. Former escape room moderator here. I worked one several years ago during the summer before my senior year. I once forgot to lock the door into the second of the 2 rooms, and they figured out it wasn't locked. They went briefly into the second room, and one of them locked the door jokingly, then they forgot about it. 5 minutes later the door was closed, and they were all locked in the first room again. Story 2, in this same room, which was police themed, one of the players is always in handcuffs. Usually, if it's a birthday party, the birthday girl or boy is the one handcuffed. We had this whole thing where the group is waiting to go into the orientation room, and one of us comes out and arrests the chosen target. Then we take them into the room while the rest of the group is guided to the orientation room. This one time there was a cute girl about my age and from my high school who was having a birthday. My supervisor did not know this, but was busy with paperwork and told me to go arrest the birthday person. And so I did. The problem came when I opened the door to the escape room and someone had apparently turned the lights out in the hour before the arrest, after I had reset the room. I kinda just pushed her into the room and ran to the control room to turn the lights on. They all knew there were cameras and she was cool with it, even cracking jokes about it during the escape room, and she told me afterwards she thought it was hilarious that people at school found out that I had been employed to handcuff a cute girl and take her to a dark room, and I was too embarrassed to go to school for a week after that got around. I learned that people have very interesting trains of thought. The strangest and most infuriating thing has to be this. We had a clock in the room. It's rather high up on the wall and the numbers its hands were pointing to were a clue to a puzzle. I give them the spiel about not breaking anything. Nothing on the wall needs to be taken down, and you get a flashlight. If it dies, please radio me for a replacement. About 20 minutes into this one group's adventure, I get radio telling me they need a hint. I come in, and they begin explaining what they have done. Apparently, the flashlight flickered when they turned it on, and they took that as a clue that the battery did not belong in the flashlight. They ripped the clock off the wall, it was glued there, and jammed the battery into it, then put it back. 10 minutes later nothing had happened. What now? I told them that that was unnecessary, pried the battery back out. There was glue residue everywhere. It was not easy, and gave them a nudge towards opening one of the locked boxes they needed first. Then I left. A few moments later I went oh shit, and went running back into the room because I realized that they'd left the battery in the clock for 10 minutes before they called me in, and the hands were in the wrong place. For the next 10 minutes these people watched me drag a chair in, pull the clock down, take it outside, unscrew the clock face and move the hands back, and then I noticed the second hand couldn't be moved manually. I had to wedge another battery back into the clock, wait 40 seconds for it to go back into the right place, and then yank it back out, and go back, and hang the clock in place, and then tell the group what to do with the clock. They asked if they could have more time. We said no. There was also another booking after them. I guess it was my bad for not watching the camera more closely. I think I had to help a different group at the time. But in my defense I had told them they didn't need to rip anything off the wall, and no one has ever done that with a flashlight battery before. The most amusing was watching the camera feed of a group meticulously inspecting the ground for who knows what, and then carefully placing these candlesticks and specifically chosen books off the shelf in specific locations. They were laughing really hard, but they were also dead serious, which made it even funnier. I admit I watched them for a good 5 to 10 minutes before I felt really bad and asked if they needed a hint. When I went in it looked like they tried to set up a very complicated ritual. Lol. Man, I've seen everything. Worked at a horror escape room, a group so high they all took a nap on the bed in the floor of the room. The entire 45 minutes a group of 16-year-olds with one adult make chaperone. He got too scared to continue the game and had to be pulled out. The girls did better once he left a drunk dude peeing in the very fake toilet in the room. This one's a little dark, but I'll never forget the creepy old guy who was clearly abusing his wife at home. He wouldn't allow her to talk. He would grab the wife and push her behind him whenever she tried to help the kids. We paused the game multiple times to tell him to stop. Cassie Affleck blow off the Oscars to come play one of our rooms. Probably wasn't invited because of all the sexual harassment. The amount of Karens who insist their very young children are definitely above the age of 13. That was our age limit. This was a horror themed experience. Then when we asked for the kids' ID we'd be screamed at and told we are violating their rights or something. Men sticking flashlights into their mouths so they can keep using both hands to look around. Don't do this. We may not have time to wipe down the flashlights before the next group comes in. So yeah, we see a lot. One guy took his shirt off and played the game for at least 15 minutes without it on. He only put it back on after my manager had asked. Another time, there was a bulb that had been broken, so we covered it with electric and painter's tape and a note detailing a request by staff not to expose the light socket. Even though I'd said at the start of the game not to touch the bulbs and not to touch the tape during the game. Someone removed a bulb from another area, raced over like they had a brilliant light bulb of an idea, ripped up the note/tape, and jammed the light bulb in. They blew the power for the whole room. They acted like we were the worst people on the planet. Another time, another couple started to get cozy on one of the bunk beds. When they got frustrated they weren't solving things. Having to ask them to stop was the strangest things I ever had to say over a mic. Another time, kid vomited all over the floor when playing with his friends. They were all pretty young too. The parent had left them for the hour by themselves. They tried to ask us to clean up around them as they still solved the puzzles. Whole bunch of other things that seem like common sense but go out the window when people think things are tricky or the only solution. Holy crap, I never imagined the 3 months I spent working at an escape room would come in handy. One of our flagship puzzles held a red herring at the end of the room, where the solution was simply asking the host, me, for the key to the room's exit, which I had for the majority of the room hidden under my giant faking toffet. We had a projection blast the image of a top hat on the monitor, and really I've run the full gambit of teams that struggle with this final task of just asking me for the key. ranging anywhere from 8-year-olds to 50-year senior executives at Google finding some of the strangest solutions possible. One of them was pretty astounding. This one team consisted of 7 people, 5 engineers and 2 self-professed escape room fanatics with a lot of experience running rooms around the city. Well, they breezed through the room in record time, something like 20 minutes by this final clue. For reference, the record from about 800 runs was something like 33:15. So these guys were a shoo-in for getting the record until the projection shone against the wall with an image of a top hat point. It's here where someone unfortunately said, "Okay, this must be the second part of the puzzle room," unaware that this was the last clue to the puzzle room because they were so fast. It was awesome to see them have so much fun and get really competitive. Honestly, one of the best teams I had the fortune to MC for. But I swear, once the problem became less about logic and solving puzzles and became a matter of just asking me for the key, they all started to go on some wild goose chases for the final puzzle. Some of them started peeling off paint on the walls, pulling out floorboards, to my behest OFC, and trying to knock against the walls for any dull sound. I was only allowed by my boss to remind them not to damage the furniture, but otherwise, me and the staff all had a pretty great time over voice comms as I described to them just how fast this one team fell in terms of sheer speed over quite possibly the most unpuzzle room-like clue. A full 40 minutes later, as the timer counted down, one of the guys got so frustrated he actually started telling me how dumb the room was, to which I just pointed at the picture of my hat projected against the wall with my pointer finger as the announcer counted down 5.4, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. One of the team dropped to his knees and began to cry out in sarcastic exasperation, the same dude who's been leading the team throughout the entire run. Eventually, I asked them all to line against the wall so I could answer any questions they had. Most of them had spent the past 30 minutes scouring the room, and by this point, had been so exhausted they'd began to hunch back against the walls like a group of sore victims, complaining at the difficulty of the room. With the projector on the entire time, I pointed to the top hat on the screen, then to the top hat on my head, then to the top hat on the screen, on my head, screen, head, screen, head. "Oh my fucking god, it's under his hat," shouted one of the female engineers. I walked up to her, gave her a steady bow along with my hat, where a silver key was adorned in a hidden top sleeve. She takes it out, grabs the door knob and escapes the room with the others, but unfortunately with 5 minutes over the time limit. Yeah, a bunch of them looked really distraught and honestly said the escape room was too hard on the survey sheet, but that didn't stop them from coming back the next weekend to try our much harder escape room upstairs, which they actually completed in record time point. So I guess the moral of the story is, if you solve like 50 puzzles, don't expect a second arc. You're their soldier, you're good man.